So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Jill herself, a very accomplished poet. I've had the privilege of hosting Jill on a number of occasions at the Hurst, and she has been director of Malaika's Poetry Kitchen since 2010. What I know of Jill is that she's absolutely passionate about supporting, nurturing, sharing, and working really hard to connect writers and particularly poets from all over the world at all different stages of their career. So it is my great pleasure, Jill, to hand over to you.
Oh, thank you, Natasha. Can you all see me blushing? Well, welcome from all over the world. I'm in Brixton, South London. I'm thrilled that so many people have come. It's great to see some of the Malaika's Kitchen family in the audience as well. And as Natasha said, we are celebrating Too Young, Too Loud, Too Different. Kitchen is 20 years old. And this book came out in August in the UK. And on Tuesday, it's available to those of you in the US. So there are new poems from more than 60 members of the family over the last 2 decades. There's the most amazing history written by Daniel Cram, one of the Malaika's Kitchen family. He's written about how Kitchen started and how it's kept going. There's also a foreword from Malaika Booker herself, and at the end there is a guide to starting your own poetry kitchen. So we've not got much room around our own table, and some of you are probably too far away to sit around it anyway. So read that guide and set up your own. So what is Malaika's Poetry Kitchen? It was a space set up by Malaika Booker and Roger Robinson 20 years ago, as I've said, for poets, including themselves, who were being overlooked by the establishment. And they wanted a space where they could nurture each other and support each other in all aspects of their career. And it started in Malaika's house in Brixton. I'll tell you a secret, it didn't start in her kitchen. The kitchen was too cold. It started in her bedroom. If you call something Malaika's bedroom, it has other connotations. So Malaika's Poetry Kitchen it is. And the main activity excuse me, the main activity is workshops, and at the beginning they met every Friday in Malaika's house. Now it's 6 times a term, and most of the sessions are led by other members, bringing their own experience and passions and sharing that with the members. Obviously, during lockdown, we were on Zoom, but we've recently started a new partnership with the London Library, and we've had our first few sessions in central London at the very prestigious London Library. So that's been quite exciting. And there's been a big change. For 20 years. Malaika's Kitchen met on Friday nights, and the library couldn't accommodate us on Friday. So now we meet on Tuesdays. Revolutionary. So that's enough blabbing, I think. Let's go to the poems. So we have 8 poets for you tonight from all over the world, and they are each going to read their own poem from the book, and they've chosen one by somebody else as well. And so I am going to introduce them in kind of chronological order of when they were in Kitchen. There are a few liberties that I've taken. So we're going to start by going right back to the beginning. And a young man from Chicago had just arrived in London and didn't really think of himself as a poet, but he wanted to get involved, and somebody pushed him in Malaika Booker's direction. And he went along to find her, and she said, "Do you write poems?" And he said yes. And she said, "Then you're a poet, come to my house on Friday night." So right there at the very, well, he says he was only there at the second meeting, but for the next 2 years while he was in London, every Friday night, Peter Kahn was at Malaika's house. And when he went back to Chicago, he set up a kitchen there as well. And so we're now going to have the 3 poets from Chicago, starting with the first one. Please welcome Peter Kahn.
Hey, from Chicago. Yes, it's true. I was at the second meeting, and I was the first one there. So I was also opening the door and getting to meet a whole bunch of really cool people who became important in my life. So I'm excited to get to be the first reader from this anthology. So I'll start with my poem, and then I'll introduce another poem, and then introduce a couple of my friends in Chicago. So my poem is called Home Again. and it goes like this. In the red phone box across the street from the Royal National Hotel, which I just walked by yesterday, 30 years later, I plink coins into a hungry mouth while tears bump and grind in my eyes as I tell Dad, I can't do this. I want to come home. He's in Ohio and I'm 3 days into a semester abroad in London, and I'm begging to make 4 days abroad and back to Boston, where my junior year of college parades forward without me. My pocket was stuffed with pounds, but I reach in and only 3 still reside there. Dad says, give it another week and we can figure it out then. I'm coinless and only get out the O and OK before Dad is just a rude tone. A week stammers by, and then 13 years later, I live here for 2 years. Then every summer, then again for a year 6 years ago, so that London is where my mom says, enjoy your time back home. So that's my piece. And yeah, my mom really does say that whenever I go back to London. I miss being there the last couple of summers. So hopefully COVID permitting, I'll be back in June. So I got to select a poem by a young man who's been to Chicago, and we had a great time together. He came over here when he was, I think, 16 or 17 years old and befriended my students. So Jamal M. Sabele, thank you, B, for helping me with that, goes by Eclipse, and I really love this poem. It's called Kaleidoscope. So here goes. The flavors of the world are sticky sweets in Newham's pockets. 3 miles from the city of London in the womb of the East End, Newham sits on the bend of the river, pregnant with 365 languages and dialects: Bengali, Greek, Yoruba, Patois, Cockney. Watching her belly swell each day, a shifting scene. Today, I walk through East Ham High Street, travel the globe in an hour, smelling the fresh aromas of dal, falafel, jollof rice, jerk chicken, pie and mash. I flare my nostrils to take it all in, like a hippopotamus yawning. Eatery lights flash at me, sunlight on silver and gold. I buy into them, all burning cultures on my tongue. This kaleidoscope swirl of tastes hold nations in my mouth, as if my saliva were the oceans. So that's a hell of a poem. It also made me think of Ridley Road Market when I first moved to London, and close to where I met Malaika in August of 2001. I lived right down the street from Ridley Road Market. So it made me think back to that, which is a really great memory. So I get the honor of introducing 2 good friends here in Chicago who are quite influential here. So first off, Ms. Tara Betts, and when she comes on, you're going to see her bookshelf, which makes mine seem quite meager. She's infamous for telling people, if you want to become a better writer, you got to read more. And she's been telling us that for over 20 years here in Chicago. Between her and Ugochi, there isn't a young or young-ish poet who wasn't mentored by one or the other, if not both. She gives a ton to the community. She's mentored so many of us, myself included, and my students included. And we're really lucky to have her here. She's been to London. She's met people such as Jacob over the years in London and Chicago. And please welcome to the virtual stage, Tara Betts.
Oh my goodness, Peter's gonna make me cry. Thank you again to all of you guys in Malaika's kitchen, Malaika, Roger, Jacob. I remember meeting Dean, and he looked like such a little kid. Now he looks like such a grown-up. So it's really exciting to be here, and it was difficult to pick another poem, but I picked one, and I'm really excited to read that, and mine as well. So I'll start with the poem that I chose that isn't mine, just to switch it up a little bit and hold up the book, because you got to see this beautiful cover. The poem that I chose was Christina Font's, I'm hoping I'm saying it right because it's spelled Fonthes, Her poem is called Rebirth. This is for you, Black girl. You who came into this world with nothing but your broken brown skin and a zinc bucket full of salt water. This is for you, Black girl. You who were told that your hair was too kinky, too coily, too tight, too black, too thick, too ugly for them to love you. This is for you, Black girl. You who were told to close your legs when your uncle came to visit, only for him to be waiting around the corner when your mom went to her cleaning job in the mornings. This is for you, Black girl. You who were told that you are not enough, that you can't keep a man, that you can't be with a woman, that you shouldn't have had so many goddamn children. This is for you, Black girl. You who went to sleep, hair wrapped in an ice blanket under the gaze of a grinning moon, and woke up to the sounds of police sirens and flashing lights in a half-painted bedroom. You gave yourself a new name, Queen, sewed it in gold and red at the hems of your tongue, doused your body in coconut oil, rinsed away the stains of self-hatred from your sinews. This is for you, Black girl. You who made a crown from barbed wire and dead butterfly wings. This is for you, Black girl. You who turned your scars into poetry. This is for you, Black girl. Such a wonderful poem. And I think it kind of dovetails really nicely with the poem that I wrote. It's inspired by a painting by a visual artist that was here in Chicago. Her name's Brittany Leanne Williams, with the same title. And you don't see it in the poem necessarily, but it's in there. It's a bunch of Black women, like nude Black women, like flying and levitating in the sky around this tree. And it's pink in the sky like dust. It's like a really beautiful painting. So if you go online, you can see it on her website. But this poem is called Transcending the Bow. To be above, to float, to rise, to crumble within the dusk, rich spectral butterflies dipped in umber and kink, pink as your palms and soles, tickling autumn leaves with tenderness, wavering like the opening of mouths, arc and flutter. You dance in the womb of the sky, among arteries and capillaries reaching out as heavy branches. Understand how roots twin that blood dance underground, spread wider, deeper. All of you, all of us, swimming, folding lofty kicks in the air. Someone will attempt to remind you, even in this, a honeyed cloudless expanse that people hid and died in such cradles. You recall and still levitate, alive, with unbound grace. So thank you. And please check this book out. It is so wonderful. And I guess our next poet, Peter's got it.
Great job, Tara. Always great to hear you read. What I neglected to say is when I came back to Chicago in 2003, I created a Chicago branch of Malaika's Poetry Kitchen. Now I'd known Tara since the late 1990s when she came and worked with our students at my high school. And I also knew Avery R. Young back then. When I came back to Chicago, they were two of the first people I enlisted to see if they wanted to be a part of this. And Avery brought in someone named Ugochi. And I'm gonna try to pronounce Ugochi's name correctly. She's coached me. Nwaogwugwu. In any case, yeah, not that great. So Ugochi then joined Malaika's Poetry Kitchen in Chicago and then came over to London initially with Avery and Krista Franklin, and then came over on additional trips and became part of the family over there, stayed with Pharaoh Malik, stayed with Malaika. And She is a beautiful poet, person, and musician. She was just a special guest with her husband at our most recent spoken word showcase. They sang some beautiful songs together, and we get to hear from her now. So please welcome to the virtual stage, Ugochi.
Peter does the best introductions, I have to say. He needs to be doing that for a living. So Malaika's Poetry Kitchen, I remember coming to Brixton and just really enjoying the mentorship and just the camaraderie. Tara mentioned some of the names before, but I'm going to add to the list after Malaika and Roger and Jacob, you know, Patricia and B, so many amazing writers and people. You know, more importantly, I think it was a community that was cultivated, and more and more reasons to keep coming to London. And I found a second home in the spaces where these writers were. So thank you for opening up your homes and your cities to me. I really, really had a wonderful time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the poem that I wrote. As you know, I live in Chicago, and Chicago has a lot of different names and reputations. But I guess in America overall, there was a lot of violence against Black bodies, Black people. And so I was seeing this, and it was really traumatic for me. And so writing was one of the ways that I kind of processed what was happening in the realm. And when I started writing, I was thinking about how there was just no forms that were written by Black people talking about Black issues in this time that was so targeted against Black people. And so I decided to change that by creating a form called the Ike. I'm from Igbo culture, traditional background, and Ike is, it means strength. So the poem was to reflect Black strength. And it was written in honor of National Poetry Month. It was born like in April as I was doing that month of writing every day. And so the power, just to bring that power forward. So it's almost like a haiku, similar in form, but only that there's, the first line is 3 syllables for red. The second line is 8 syllables for Black and the last line, the third line, is 5 syllables for green. So you just really are supposed to use this form to empower, restore, you know, just to more liberating ideas around Black people, Black issues, Black bodies, Black reality. And so that's what that really came from, just trying to uplift the Black experience. So my poem is called Sistar, and it says, African women hold up half the sky with one hand on their hip. And that's just, it's not just an attitude, it's almost like a knowing that, you know, you have to handle this, it's gotta be done. So it's part of the attitude of just doing what you know needs to be done in a real time. But that one is called Sistar. So that was a poem that I wrote specifically for Malaika's Kitchen, because it was written, it was kind of cultivated half by a beautiful Sistar that I call sister. She is a sister to me. Malaika has let me sleep in her bed so many times. She's got to be my sister at this point. So, and I love her a lot. So I'm going to also read another poem that resonated with me. And this one is by Cyril Husbands, and it's called Return. Scatter my remains to ancestral earth, where the harmattan will return me to the ephemeral embrace, and I shall fertilize the ground that gave me life, as the ancestors did before me, and those who follow will do for the children. Thank you. Love being here at Arvon. Arvon, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Chicago. Thank you, Peter and Tara and Ugochi. Now, I've been remiss. There are 2 people that I haven't mentioned, and they are very important. Maisie Lawrence and Rishi Dastidar, who have edited this book, and without them it would not exist. So a big up to Maisie and Rishi, and I apologize for not mentioning you right at the beginning. So I said the main activity of Kitchen is workshops, but one of the other important things that Kitchen has always done is pay it forward. Members of Kitchen reach out, and as you've heard, Peter went back to Chicago and set up a Malaika's Kitchen there. And our next poet, Jacob Sam-LaRose, and Peter also set up the London Teenage Poetry Slam for young poets in London. And then after Peter had gone back to Chicago, they arranged exchanges between Chicago and London for the young poets and the Kitchen members to get together. And Jacob has also paid forward in so many other ways. He runs the Barbican Young Poets, which is an amazing development opportunity for young poets in London. He's an amazing poet himself. He has a collection out with Blood Axe. So let's hear his poem. Please join us, Jacob Sam-LaRose.
Hello and good evening. I guess I'll just start by offering a little, how shall I say, kind of put forward the spirit of celebration, to give gratitude and give thanks for everything that has happened through Malaika's Kitchen, the spirit of community that Malaika's Kitchen has fostered over the years. Yeah, I'm going to keep very, very much in time because I know Jill is watching time closely. So I'll kick in straight to my first poem for the young men popping wheelies on Southwark Street in late afternoon traffic. This poem, the title pretty much says what the poem is all about. I will just very quickly before I read the poem say it's a celebration of both life and mortality. Based on a very real experience of seeing these young men on push bikes on Southwark Street just as you approach London Bridge in the midst of midday traffic, just popping wheelies and riding as if nothing could touch them. And yeah, particularly in the years since, the general sense of mortality that so many of us have experienced and been touched by. It's a poem that comes closer and closer to my heart. So yeah, for the young men popping wheelies on Southwark Street in late afternoon traffic. One day you will die, but not today. And perhaps you have already tasted it. Whatever endings taste of, a mouthful of road and iron, the weight of something implacable you couldn't lift yourself from under. Not today. Today you are brazen, quick as a blade, wheels up and threading into an HGV's path and out again, uproarious, alive, and testing whatever binds the rest of us to good sense, whatever weights another driver's fist with righteousness and ties us to our quaint and tidy appetites and has us hook our eyes to pull you down and safe and anchored to the meek and common ground. Today, everything lifts from you, like the ringing of a bell in clean air, like smoke. The second poem that I'm going to read, again by way of celebration, looking through the anthology, I really wanted to, you know, there are some names in there that I recognize, and it's a wonderful thing to see those names that I recognize from over the years. But I really wanted to select a poem from someone I didn't recognize so closely, a poem that came from the time beyond the space that I used to run kitchen sessions for. And I came upon this poem by Michelle Penn, which again kind of lodged somewhere inside me. Truncated checklist for a Gothic novel. Thank you, Michelle, for a wonderful poem. It's in 3 parts. 1, gloom, decay, mystery. Shadows mass in corridors, drift the rickety stairs. Corners groan and whispers skid while archaic rivalries hover, silhouettes imprinted on walls rotting the portraits, crumbling the boards. A hallway dead ends into stone. Beyond, a cry from an attic laden with chains, paper, daisy, iron. 2. Supernatural beings. They're crowded into night boats, but the cities they flee remain strapped to their backs, wound around their ankles. Buildings and streets cramp their fingers, but they can't relax their grasp. They can't let go. They're crowded onto night boats. They are noise and grime ghosts, human chains above the ocean's simmering brew. 3. Curses, prophecies. History is not a chain. It is a mirror. Michelle Penn, again, thank you for the poem. Malaika's Poetry Kitchen, big up yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. I can see Michelle's name in the list of attendees, so I imagine she's sitting in West London blushing right now. Jacob, that was fantastic, thank you. So the poets that we've heard already all came to Kitchen before my time. I joined in 2009. But our next poet is somebody who was in Kitchen when I joined, Heather Taylor, and she is from Canada, and she left not long after I joined Kitchen. She's now living in the USA and focusing a lot on film. She's a filmmaker, but we still drag poems out of her from time to time, including the wonderful one that is in this fabulous book. So Heather, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this. This is amazing. I feel like it's just been such a beautiful, I don't even know how long it's been, 30 minutes. It's been so amazing. I think I want to say really quickly, I moved to London and was completely alone. I'd moved, I think kind of like Peter, I was like, how am I going to do this after 1 month? And I think I remember looking in the paper, because that's when people looked in the paper when I moved there, and found that people read poetry. And I'd written poetry, but I'd never really been involved in the kind of poetry scene. And so I went to a night and I got to listen to poetry. They invited me in with open arms. I felt like such a part of a community. And then being part of Malaika's Kitchen was such a special part of my life. And I'm so glad to be part of this. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. So I want to read a poem from someone that was part of Malaika's Kitchen and part of the poetry scene that I was part of, Nick Makoa. So his poem is called How a City Vanishes. And when I read this, one of the things that I did when I lived in London was I worked with refugees, and we would do poetry and music together and really talk about their stories. And I think this really spoke to me. So it's How a City Vanishes. All it takes is 2 men on a bike, a convoy in their rearview mirror, some land, a shortage of visas, the closing of embassies, a night lowering its curtain of curfew, and some C4 to turn a dirt highway into a makeshift airstrip. Out come the men in uniform, following the flare of a flashlight towards life lurking in the long grass. White soldiers with foreign words that taste too much like caution, huddled around a wireless waiting for orders, keeping their voices down. A war reporter, tourist, and volunteer with the same faces just cleared a checkpoint, said they were on safari, hence the cameras. Tonight they will make the weekend edition of People. Tomorrow our city, or some version of it, will be as familiar as the dark side of the moon. So thanks, Nick, for writing a beautiful poem. My poem is called On the Wall, and it's really about, I think there's all these moments in our life that we think will be so dramatic and big, and sometimes the biggest and most dramatic things come in really small moments and unexpected moments. So this one is called On the Wall. At the edge of a rocky beach, he rested his head on my shoulder, and we stared across the water. His words were one I knew, but the combination unfamiliar, echoes of made-for-TV movies. They came back to me, my sick day afternoons sunk into the couch staring, except he didn't look as pale or heroic as the leading man. It was only a cough. I repeated that phrase, his mantra became mine, and as he leaned on me to repeat the telephone call from the clinic in even tones, he mentioned his favorite flowers and the party we planned to laugh over his foibles after he was gone. I promised I wouldn't cry, and he said nothing as he squeezed my hand. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. And thank you again to Malaika and Roger and Jill and Jacob and Dean and everyone here who's come. It's been an honor.
Fabulous. Thank you, Heather. The last time I saw Heather, I think, was in New York. It was lovely to see her. Don't forget that we have a bit of time for Q&A at the end of this session, so do put any questions for us in the Q&A box. And meanwhile, on to our next poet, Rosanna Raymond, who's got it very early in the morning because she's not across the pond, she's across the other side of the world. Rosanna fits in between the people who were in kitchen before I joined and the people who joined after I joined, because I met her at a networking evening that Apples and Snakes had put together when they were at the Albany, and we got chatting and she told me that she used to be in Malaika's kitchen, and I said, there's no such thing as used to be in Malaika's kitchen, you're either part of the family or not, why don't you come back? So she came back, and one of the most memorable sessions we've had is one that she led, which had poetry and movement in it. It's part of her culture to do poetry that way. So perhaps she'll tell us a bit more about it with her poem. Please welcome Rosanna Raymond. If she hasn't fallen asleep, because it's very early in the morning.
Voila. I cry the ocean, I bleed the earth, I greet you with my dead. May my waters greet your waters. May my mountains greet your mountains. May my people greet your people. May we take this time to acknowledge the past, for we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. May I take this time to acknowledge Ngāti Whātua, who hold the mana of this whenua, this land here in Tamaki Makaurau, Aotearoa, where I reside. May I take this time to give thanks and praise to Malaika's kitchen, who've never forgotten me. Wow, guys. I would say lava, malo, 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 susunga. Good morning, I'm from the future. It's Monday morning here, and I am so proud to be part of this anthology. I remember meeting Malaika through my children were going to school in England, and I was definitely muki. And this beautiful woman came into my life and invited me, yes, into her bedroom, where I met Jacob and Peter, and then I disappeared, and then I came back, thanks to Jill. So I really give so much thanks and praise for that time, because it really helped me sort of ground myself in a place where I was a little fishing out of water. So, but yeah, thank you. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote myself called Tattooing the Land. A large man has been felled, backed into the corner, revealing his tusks. They are engorged, his gaze enraged. He is flailing, falling on his haunches, mauling the walls, looking a little bit disorientated. Was it a woman who did this? No. Was it the gods? Maybe. I'm trying to figure out what they just said to me. The past blasted through my head so fast it scrambled, leaving me a code to reorder. I see his shadow has gone out dancing, leaving him alone with just his heart to engage with. Every now and again it tremors, glowing with a fiery red underflow, burning everything that it comes across, tattooing the land. Don't worry, say the gods, just take him to the open sea. Don't worry, said the woman, just give him to me. But to the poem. So, and I hope I don't murder her name, so Aroha Mai, Wasan Shaya. So thank you. I've never met you, girl, but thank you for your wonderful little poem that I'm going to share with everybody here. And it's called Midnight in the Foreign Food Aisle. Dear Uncle, is everything you love foreign, or are you foreign to everything you love? We're all animals, and the body wants what it wants. Trust me, I know. The blonde said, come in, love, take off your coat. What do you want to drink? Love is not haram, but after years of fucking women who are unable to pronounce your name, you find yourself totally alone in the foreign food aisle beside the turmeric and saffron, remembering your mother's warm, dark hands, prostrating in front of the halal meat, praying in a language you haven't used for years. I think I really identified with that poem. And it wasn't just the turmeric and the saffron, but yeah, whakatai lava, malo, susunga. It's such a privilege to be standing here amongst all the giants and the shoulders I stand on. Malaika Kitchen had such an impact on my life, and it still does. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you, Rosanna. It's so great to have you with us again. I miss you now you're back over there. Rosanna used to live just down the road, so I used to be able to see her quite easily a long time ago. And of course, I did the running order this afternoon, and now I'm regretting that I should have put her on first to do all those wonderful greetings and blessings. Anyway, back to the UK now, and to our last two poets who both joined Kitchen under my tenure. The first one, Malaika and I were standing at some after party at the South Bank Centre, and Saul Patel came over and he said, I've just been working with Daljit Nagra, and he says I should come and join Kitchen. And we just got a sense that Daljit was absolutely right, and is proved to be so as well. So I'm delighted now to welcome Saul Patel.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, thank you to everyone that's made this evening happen. I'm going to read a poem about a first experience that a lot of people have had. They will remember their first experience like this, and this was mine. Vocabulary lessons. Your swimming trunks have been pulled down, and a word said you don't recognize. You turn around to see a cropped-haired blonde boy your age looking at you. You're both in the water at the local leisure centre for a swimming class. The other children are nearby, but not within earshot. You pull your trunks up. He spits this word at you again and swims off. You are as confused as you are hurt. You feel that something has changed. And the second poem I'd like to read is by Yomi Sode. It was his birthday yesterday. And part of the reason I love this poem is the unease within it, and also the fact that as soon as you start reading it, as they say, you're in the room where it happens. So this is called 7 Up by Yomi Sode. My father rewards my good behavior, though I have no idea what I've done. He sits me down on our sofa. Its ripped edges pierce my skin. My shuffling is mistaken for nerves. His Duchenne smile a comedic tragedy of sorts, more Melpomene than Thalia. There is little sparkle in his eyes now. yet his shoulder eclipses the light bulb as he stands and walks assured to the kitchen, bringing back a 7-Up bottle dripping in cold sweat. He hooks his canine underneath the cap and pulls downwards. I watch his silhouette in awe. I hear the sound the bottle makes when placed on the table. My father rewards my good behavior with 7-Up. He pours it in a glass only used for visitors. For a moment, I see the dissipating foam as a dream. He continues to gently pour, then asks, "Do any men enter the house when Daddy is at work?" A magician that knows when 7-Up reaches the rim without overspill. Without looking, I shake my head side to side, holding a stare he soon breaks. "Am I in trouble now, Daddy?" He knuckles the filled glass towards me, then sits back, listens to each gulp. I thank him, knowing I don't know the good I done. Thank you.
Thank you, Saul, for your poem and for reading Yomi so beautifully as well. So we come to our last poet, which means that you're running out of time to put some questions into the Q&A box. Please ask some questions to us. So our final poet, we're travelling up to Glasgow, and we were quite sad when Dean Atta moved from London to Glasgow. But one of the good things about the lockdown when we went on to Zoom was that he could join us back in the around the kitchen table again. I had known and admired Dean for a long time. I think I first met him at the night he used to run called Come Rhyme With Me with Deanna Roger. And one day he said to me, "How do I join Malaika's kitchen?" And I was just astonished. I snatched his hand off and welcomed him around our table. Dean, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jill. I'm glad you told that story because, yeah, I kind of have circled the world of kitchen for a while. I shadowed Malaika on the London Teenage Poetry Slam. I worked alongside Jacob at the Roundhouse and then alongside Peter Kahn and Jacob on the Spoken Word Educators program. And so I was just too shy to find out how you got into kitchen, but eventually I was just like, no, I really want to be in kitchen. So I just asked Jill and I was welcomed with open arms, and it's been such a wonderful experience, and so much has come of my relationships through kitchen and friendships and kind of just growing as a person and a poet. And yeah, we've been through a lot together, kitchen. So and as Tara said, I think, you know, Tara saw me as a boy and now I'm a man, and I think this poem kind of talks to that. Like, I've grown up with poetry, and yeah, I kind of chart my growing up through my poetry, I guess, as well. So this is called Ode to My Cuticles, and it's about going from boyhood to manhood. When mum wasn't too busy, she would tend to you, give her boy a manicure, cuticles always growing, often dry. I try to keep you moisturized and neat, hands that work, grip pens, bottles of beer. You are open curtains to an empty window, a stage that holds so much potential. Our fingers could hold any color. Now mum is too busy to notice. I go to a nail technician. You don't want color, he asks. I could say yes, but don't. Why would I add any more unwanted attention to this body? I already have this skin. My friends tell me of street harassment they receive for nail varnish, lipstick, or eyeshadow. No man has commented on my nails before or after a manicure. I notice when you are unruly, unkempt, getting out of line. Like when my hair or beard needs a trim. I would go to my barber weekly, but when I did, he told me I didn't need another haircut, even though I pay him. He holds my head so tenderly, and I miss him like I've always missed my father. I can only go to my barber every 2 weeks. This haircut is so precise yet unremarkable. My afro and dreadlocks got too much attention and hands in my hair without consent. My therapist told me I can go to him every 2 weeks. I don't pay him, so I have no choice. You are with me when I tell my therapist, I wish a man would stay with me long enough, look at me often enough to notice you, how I do, how he, how I do, how she used to. So that's my poem. And I'm gonna end on a haiku from a dear friend in Kitchen, Hannah Gordon. And yeah, she's actually one person that's been up to visit me in Glasgow, and we went for a lovely walk in Queen's Park, the local park here. And when I managed to get down to London, she took me in turn to Kew Gardens, and we had a wonderful time there. And Hannah is just such a beautiful person. And this small poem really has an impact. It's a haiku, it's a question. Home. If the place you live never really loved you back, was it still a home? And I'll leave you with that question.
That's quite a question. Thank you, Dean. And thank you to all the poets. It's been wonderful. A reminder what we've been reading from. Too Young, Too Loud, Too Different, edited by Maisie Lawrence and Rishi Dastidar. So we do have a few questions. The first one is from Nikki Crabb. So if all of the poets would like to turn on their cameras and come back in to the room. Nikki Crabb wants to know, what is the legacy of your time at Kitchen? Please jump in. Go, Dean.
Yeah, I can start with the fact that, you know, you never leave. And I think that's really wonderful, so that we can always call upon each other. Even members of Kitchen you haven't met in person, I feel like we can still, you know, connect and help each other out when the time comes for someone to make that introduction and make it happen. Now I've moved up to Glasgow, for example, Nick McCullough came virtually and did some sessions for me in the Scottish Black Writers group that I've set up here. And, you know, that's the legacy of Kitchen, that, you know, wherever we go in the world, we can call upon one another and people will show up.
I would also say that it's a little bit to add to what Dean said. That's so true, the community that is extended, but also just what we as individual writers are doing in our own spaces, I think is the legacy too, because everyone has their skill set and their community, their network, and they're actually, even without knowing everyone, I know that they're moving and shaking, because the people that I do know, they're doing a lot of work and they won't stop doing that wherever they are. So we also take that and that craft and that ethic into spaces that we are in.
I'm going to say, I think it helped me find my voice, I think, like not only find a community and a home away from home, it gave me a voice and the permission to tell my own stories, which now has allowed me to bring it into my other work. So not just poetry, but bringing it into film and television and trying to continue to share stories that may not be heard. So I think it's definitely comes from Malaika's Kitchen.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, as far as what Heather and Dean said, that echoes a lot of what I'm thinking, but I know a lot of us here in Chicago, we were performing and I think figuring out kind of what our aesthetics were as writers, figuring out how to workshop together. Most of the time we would meet in Peter's living room. So I think it's a very similar thing to what Malaika was doing. But the added bonus is we got to have people from a country a lot of us had never been to and meet all these kids who were a lot like the kids we taught in Chicago, but also like bringing different stuff that made it just like, wow, this is really a cultural experience. And when I think about, I'm glad there's a history in the beginning of the book, because particularly when you have marginalized writers, there's not an archiving of how they met, how they got together, and valuing that space. And this is particularly interesting because it's an intercultural and now intergenerational space that spans multiple countries. And I'm sorry, I don't think mainstream literature has caught up to that yet. They need to, but to think that it happened in such an intimate and small way, and then it's just kind of mushroomed from that is beautiful.
I'll say, as an educator, the trickle-down effect for me has been profound, particularly from what I learned from Malaika, Roger, and Jacob those first couple of years in London, and then my visits back. So the legacy goes well beyond the people in Malaika's kitchen, but all the people that we have worked with in addition to that.
I'll just add, for me, it's seeing what working towards mastery of an art form looks like. Either the people, the teachers that are brought, or the people that you're within kitchen with. One saying that it's getting that sense of mastery and insight coming in. And it was one of these one of the poets that came said this phrase to me: poetry exists because language is insufficient to describe the world. And that level of insight and mastery that you get at kitchen, that's what really sticks with me. And you know, you could go somewhere where you think you're doing great work and you think you're mastering the art, but you're not really. At kitchen, you know where you're working towards mastering something, and when you're making progress. So that's lovely as well.
Just very quickly, I'll jump in and just echo something that Peter said in terms of that sense of the spidering out of community. And I remember kind of way back in the day, Malaika traveling and coming back from some residency or something that she was doing, and saying that there was this kind of nascent chapter of Malaika's Kitchen in India, and all the various different kind of connections that just Malaika personally was making at that time, but then all the things that spider out from those people who've experienced Malaika's Kitchen, then pass that on to other people, and point them back in the direction of Malaika's Kitchen. Just that kind of that growth and that spidering out of this kind of sensibility of doing for self and doing for each other. And when I say doing for self, I refer to that notion that there was something that Malaika's Kitchen was doing that just wasn't so present elsewhere at the time. And yeah, there was very much that kind of, well, if it's not there, then we will make it. And that whole sense of creating something that perhaps wasn't so present, but then, you know, constructing it in such a way that it kind of encompassed those other people that we believed in and wanted to invest in. Yeah, there was something lovely, very lovely about that, and very lovely to see that continue to grow through the years.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. We have time for another 2 questions, and I'm going to put them into one. Mary Mulholland has asked if you have advice on running a collective, and Linda Haggerston has on setting up your own collective. Linda Haggerston wants to know if there's a kitchen near Paisley, and also wanting advice on how to get one going, perhaps. Maybe Peter, you set up kitchen in Chicago. Maybe you'd like to say something?
Well, I'd say get the book and read what Malaika wrote, right? There's a map to build your own there. No idea about Paisley, but it sounds like if you read the book, you'll be able to create your own in Paisley as well. But I would say maybe Jacob would be the one to answer this.
Which is hilarious, because I was thinking exactly the same thing, Peter, in that Malaika has already put forward such a wonderful resource in the back of the anthology, which is kind of another nod towards picking up the anthology, really. But yeah, there's such a wonderful guide there. Also, maybe to add to that, June Jordan's Poetry for the People, which has been around for a minute now, but also has some really useful thinking in terms of establishing a poetry program, and some thinking around what your pedagogical poetics might be, like what it is that you actually want to do through your community and with the kind of aspects of craft that you want to celebrate or engage with or invest in, and reach out. I mean, obviously, this is partly what you're doing in this moment. You're reaching out to these people here who have been members of Kitchen and some of the people who've led Kitchen, but continue to do that, continue to knock on the doors and send emails to those people who have run successful communities like this and ask for those kind of crystal points.
Dean, you talked about setting up something when you moved to Glasgow. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking I was going to chip in, but I didn't know if we had time. And I think it's just consistency. I think picking the day, the time, and doing it regularly. So if it's once a week or once a month, be there. And if it's just you and one other person, that's fine. If it's you on your own, sit there and write. Like if 3 people, 4 people, it will grow with consistency. I think that's really important. And yeah, if you are in Paisley, I'll be in Paisley at the book festival in February. So come and say hello and we can maybe talk some more. But I think consistency is key, as well as all the other things, in terms of knowing what you want that space to be and making it that kind of safe space and that space of kind of fruitfulness and respect is really important for that. So yeah, just know what you want to generate in that space and kind of what you want the vibe to be, and kind of be consistent with it.
And Rosanna, I know you've set up communities and been very involved in communities here and over there. Do you have anything to contribute to this?
I think really just what Dean said, it's that consistency. It's, yeah, making sure that you're there, even if it is just you. And yeah, and it pays you back in so many ways that you never sort of think possible when you give. You know, the more you give, the more you get, and I completely believe that. So thank you.
Thank you all. I'm afraid we're about to run out of time. I believe that poetry events should end with a poem. So before we have our final poem, I'm going to hand over to Natasha Kalish, our wonderful host here from Arvon. And thanks to Akala, who's also been teching this evening. Natasha, she's going to give an Arvon sign off.
What an amazing evening. I was sitting here nodding and crying, particularly with your introduction, Rosanna. I felt like I could have been sitting in New Zealand, and then all the beautiful readings and the beautiful words. I feel quite emotional just sitting here, really. When I reached out to Jill and said, you know, Arvon are trying to find ways to work with new kinds of communities. I mean, we've worked with Malaika and Roger and Dean and Jacob and Jill and so many people, I think, from the kitchen over the years, but we really wanted to kind of reach out in a more kind of collaborative way, I suppose. So this is one of many partnerships that we are sort of working to develop in lots of different ways. And it's been such an honour and a privilege to hear you all reading this evening, such a wide variety of voices. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm supposed to do a little plug for all the other things that we have at Arvon and Arvon at Home, but it just feels deeply inappropriate. I will just say that I think community, you know, is very much at the heart of what Arvon is about as well. So it felt like when you were talking about community, that really sort of chimed with me, and the kind of nurturing and the kind of the mastery of craft. I know, Saul, you talked about. So for anyone in the audience who's not part of Kitchen, who doesn't know anything about Arvon, go and check out our website. We have lots of different courses and offers, both online and kind of at our houses. But for now, thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much to Akala behind the scenes doing a beautiful tech host job, and Jill, well done for organising and pulling all these incredible voices together. Go buy that anthology if you haven't got it already, and Jill, I hand over to you for the final word.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you to all of you across the world, wherever you've zoomed in from, for joining us to listen. And thanks in particular to Dean, Saul, Tara, Peter, Heather, Rosanna, Ugochi and Jacob for reading their poems, and some of the others from the book. It's been fantastic. I would like to endorse Arvon. I've done several Arvon courses and come out better for every one of them. And now that you know they're doing a lot more at home as well as in the houses, it's much more accessible for people who can't perhaps travel for all sorts of reasons. Check out our website, malaikaspoetrykitchen.com, to find out what else we're doing, and please buy the book. So I promised I would finish off with a poem, and I'm going to choose the one, just changing my glasses, the one by Daniel Cram, who wrote the wonderful history. I found it really hard to read any of the poems, because whenever I read the history or Malaika's bits, I just burst into tears every time. So I haven't read that many of the poems, because I think if the prose can do that, what will the poems do? Anyway, the final word of this wonderful event goes to Daniel Cram. at the edge of a terrain. There's too much autumn now for one life to still see. My word-wrapped wordlessness, like a wound stretching out my skin. I can no longer think in this country. Shrink-sealed sphere, a clinic cold. My outline shrivels like a flower blooming in reverse.